between, because it means like the tier 1 orgs that are applying to be a part of this system don't have to be afraid that like, oh, we're going to get obliterated if some random team comes up. It means it'll be worthwhile for them to actually invest in like team houses and putting effort into the content and like putting all this like work in to make things happen, especially since they like don't really have to pay things besides player salary and they're getting a big stipend from Riot. Like it feels like a pretty solid in between to me.
The centerpiece of your Noche Buena is filled with buttercream frosting, white choco ganache, cherry whipped cream, and moist chocolate layers. The Frosty Cherry Choco Cake. Celebrate Christmas with Goldilocks.
Yeah, for sure. Benkai, what's your general feel on the franchise announcement? Is there a sense of relief?
If I say that I'm relieved, I would be saying that I'm assuming I'm going to be in the T2 scene. which right now, fingers crossed, I get into like the tier 1 franchising league, right? So that's the goal for us. But at the same time, it's a huge relief to see that Riot isn't just throwing all of these T2 teams under the bus, right?
Yeah, I think for APAC in particular. For APAC in particular, there were concerns that like the way that the groups are distributed, they wouldn't get a solid representation from each of the smaller communities that make up APAC. But with this, you probably will. It'll go some way to mitigate that, especially because they're planning to expand it up to 42 teams, which is 14 from each region. So by the time you get to 2027, and of course things could change in the next 5 years, but this is their game plan. By the time you get to 2027, there's 14 teams per international league. And those 4 extra teams are being constantly rotated. Not every year, but there's going to be fresh faces every year as like half come in, half come out. And I think that's cool. I think you're going to see player turnover in a way that doesn't just feel like teams are exploding every year, but you're also going to see it feels like, to your point as to the Overwatch scene, if I imagine myself in an org's position, this is worth investing for. This reward is worth investing to try and acquire, because it could make the difference. I was talking to my stream yesterday when I was talking through this announcement. And someone brought up Sentinels as the perfect example. They really weren't a big organization at the beginning of Valorant. They got their team together that started winning tournaments and looking really good. 2 years later, they've absolutely exploded. The difference between Sentinels 2 years ago and now, it's a complete different organization. I mean, it's not from a structural point of view, but it is from how people perceive it, the sponsorships that they're getting, the views that they're getting, the revenue I'm sure that they're getting in as well. So that 2 years can just change the course of an org completely. And that feels like it'll be worth investing in, which means that the players will actually have salaries rather than just playing for £2.50 and a packet of crisps in tier 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is I mean, it can't be understated how important this is for the life of the game and its longevity, and also just the creation of intrigue for the tier 2 scene. Seeing who will actually be promoted each season is very valuable in itself. It actually makes watching those games and paying attention to that scene more valuable and more interesting, as there's so much more on the line for the players, for the organizations that are involved. Because I mean, what you're saying, that could be the difference maker for an organization versus other tier 2 scenes where there was not really, there's actually incentive in this system for teams to perform well in tier 2 and stick together, which in other franchise systems, it's every fucking person for themselves. You just want to be the best. That was one of the main problems I was facing, was like everybody was just the only hope in some other systems like the Overwatch one where I get picked up by a team and I get into Owl. But there's no way that this whole team is going to. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's actually a reason for players and teams to stick together, you know? Like, a team like Ghost could look at this and feel like it's actually okay. Like, we could play challengers. We could same roster that those guys have been playing together for so long. I'm sure a core of that team want to stick together through thick and thin, you know? And that's the kind of team that, yeah, we could actually play in this and we could just qualify because we're good.
Yeah.
And you know, you don't need to just see all these rosters that people like explode.
There was also there was a Washington Post article that mentioned that there will be measures in place to stop teams poaching once they actually get qualified through. You know, so a tier 2 team that wins Ascension can't just be ripped apart as it qualifies. And I assume that will also mean that you need a certain amount of your players to maybe keep the spot, although that would be weird.
That makes me think that maybe it's probably tied to players and not to the organization.
It's not. I talked to the person in charge of the announcement, and he did say that it was tied to the org. And didn't give me any specifics on like the player safeguarding stuff, but they said that there will be safeguards in place. It's just that the details of that really need to be fleshed out, I think, a little bit, and maybe people have the details behind the scenes, but I doubt it at this point. Also, there's another weird part to this, which is there's no plan in here for China at all. They said again in that Washington Post article that they have no interest in, or currently no current plans in expanding the amount of partner teams, and in the reports there were no partner teams allocated to China, and yet the game surely at some point is going to be released, right? And there's already a Chinese team playing in Champions. So what the fuck's going on there?
Awkward.
I assumed that they'll have their own challenger league once the game begins, but then never have any partner teams. That would be really odd.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you win,
a lot of things just riding on EDG's shoulders right now.
Yeah. The future of Valorant in China rides on EDG. Benkai, for the safety of the game, you need to toss that game. The opening game, you just need to throw it away.
Team, you know?
Guys, make you match fix for China. Do it for China.
It's the long-term.
I'm helping the ecosystem, man, in China, so you guys can thank me later.
I mean, it's the only region where people have already been banned for match fixing as well. So yeah, I'm sure you could find people who are interested if you wanted to.
Oh my god,
it's true. It's rampant.
All right, is there anything else? Anything else that needs to be discussed with this release announcement? Is there anything that I'm forgetting?
Well, I just wanted to get Benkai's point of view. There's so many different challenger leagues here for APAC. If you look at North America, it's one challenger league, so everyone's going to be tuning in and watching that. From your point of view, do you think that the Pacific region has been split up in this way for like logistical reasons, like ping, language barriers, stuff like this? Do you see it being helpful or harmful that they kind of don't play together until there's this like Ascension tournament?
I don't really see a world where all of these teams get pretty good practice against each other, especially those regions in, I would say, Korea, Japan, maybe South Asia. These regions are pretty separated from the rest of APAC in terms of getting scrims and getting good ping. So there's going to be like a very huge disparity when the Ascension Leagues come, where you kind of see these teams have these huge gaps with other regions because they just don't get that kind of practice with each other. So I'm not sure how that's gonna benefit everyone to split all of these regions up into so many different ones. But I'm sure it'll work out, you know.
Ever the optimist.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose the only region I'm concerned for in regards to Korea. Help! Someone, Achilleos, paper thin. Someone do something. Help!
This LCQ